Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for attending our salary negotiation workshop. My name is Sadell Sewall. I use she, her pronouns, and I'll go ahead and let Abby and Taylor introduce themselves real quick.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. I am my name is Abigail Gonzalez, but most call me Abby, and I use she and ella pronouns, and I am one of the program coordinators at the Women's Center along with Sadell, my counterpart. Yeah, I'm very excited.
I'm very excited too. Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Nagel. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the events coordinator at the Career Success team, and super excited for today's event. Thank you.
Awesome. So today's session is going to be a total of 2.5 hours. There'll be a little break halfway through, but get nice and comfortable because we're going to be here for a little while. And I'd also like to mention that we'll be raffling off gift cards to folks who stay for the entire event. So if you want to be entered into that, stick around. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kimberley Bueno-Schonig, a UCSC alum and consultant who will be leading this workshop today. So welcome, Kimberley.
Thank you so much, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberley Bueno-Schonig. As Sadell mentioned, I am an award-winning serial entrepreneur. I won Best 50 Women in Business last year, but I also have a huge corporate background in HR. And I see that people are saying they have a time conflict, or if they're not able to stay for the entire time. Taylor is recording this and she will be sharing the replay. So don't worry, you will have an opportunity to watch the replay. So we have so much to dive in. If you are staying with us through the entire session, feel free to open the salary negotiation workbook that Taylor had sent to all of you. If you do not have it, feel free to send her a message in the chat box and she can send you a copy if you did not receive it. This is something we're going to go through in real time. It's also something that you can work through, on your own time after today's workshop, but we're really going to hone in on all the different strategies and exercises that are in the salary negotiation workbook. So I'm just going to give you a few seconds. Hopefully you already have it up. If you don't have time to get it up, don't worry. Taylor's sharing her screen to kind of walk through the process. So basically what I want to kind of first talk about is just give a small disclaimer. So I am a business and career consultant and coach. So the information that I'm sharing here today is not official information regarding what you, so to speak, should be doing or professional recommendations. I am not a CPA, I'm not an attorney. However, I do have recruiting experience and HR experience. So I've seen the ins and outs of how candidates have negotiated the gender pay gap in certain companies. I've also witnessed, what goes on inside a company and why they make certain decisions. So what I'm sharing with you today are some strategies that I've taken from my corporate background in HR and in recruiting and also in terminations, and kind of sharing you some strategies and sharing with you some strategies and some exercises to essentially help you level up your conversations when you have those salary negotiation conversations with companies that you might be interested in working with. So that's just a small disclaimer. Now, I'm going to have Taylor scroll down to our very first page regarding pay gap statistics. So thank you so much, Taylor. So when I first created this, this was created before payscale.com had released their 2021 statistics. So I'm just going to go over the statistics specifically in 2020 in this workbook, but I do have just some statistics for 2021. If you want to read more information about 2021 pay gap statistics, you can just go to payscale.com/data/gender pay gap, which I'll also link in the chat. right here. But essentially what I've noted here is in 2020, I've highlighted two specific types of metrics. So essentially the way that pay scale talks about the pay gap is in an uncontrolled and controlled type of context. So in an uncontrolled statistic measure, the company payscale.com or other divisions will be measuring the median salary for all men and women. So this means that this is just a generic overall approach to how they review salaries across all men and women. And in this case, let me just pull up on my end. In 2020, women earn 81 cents for every dollar earned by men. And that's from an uncontrolled statistic. From a controlled statistic, which means you're measuring median salary for men and women with the same job and same level of experience. So sometimes you'll want to look at a controlled perspective to really hone in and compare a woman with the same amount of experience, same job title, etc., to men who have the same job experience and job title. And in this respect, in 2020, women earn 98 cents for every dollar earned by men, right? And this is 2020. So keep in mind that these numbers are better than what it was years ago, right? But it's still not good enough, obviously. Some additional statistics that I want to highlight as well that you can read in the workbook is that the uncontrolled median salary for men is roughly 19% higher than the median salary for women. And the median salary from an uncontrolled perspective shows a 2% improvement from 2019 and a 7% improvement from 2015. So as you can see, we're making some small improvements and changes, but we're still not there. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because it's important to understand why the gender pay gap is important. You obviously are tuning in because you know that it's important in some respect, but to understand how it affects you is also important. So what we're really trying to highlight in terms of these pay gap statistics is really showcasing the difference in earnings between men and women, right? And so things that can cause this gender wage gap can be differences in industries or jobs work, differences in years of experience, differences in hours worked, and sometimes discrimination. Taylor, do you mind if you go to the next? Perfect, thank you. So something I also wanted to kind of break down is what does it look like in terms of the gender pay gap for people of color, particularly women of color. So keep in mind that the statistics located in this workbook is specific to uncontrolled measures, which again, if you go back to the other page, uncontrolled measures means median salary for all men and women. So we're not looking specifically at comparisons. We're just looking across the board. And for that, what we're seeing is that for American Indian and Alaska Native, women who identify with that earn 75 cents for every dollar earned by men. Now, for women who identify as Asian, they earn 95 cents for every dollar earned by men. For Black or African American, women earn 75 cents for every dollar earned by men. Hispanic identification for women earns 75 cents for every dollar earned by men. Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander women earn 80 cents for every dollar earned by men. And white women earn 81 cents for every dollar earned by men. And again, the statistics is reflective of 2020. So as you can see from these statistics, women who identify as American Indian, Alaska Native, Black or African American, and Hispanic are typically the ones that earn even less in comparison to other ethnicities or women of color, right? So what hopefully the takeaway is that we can empower all women of color and women in general to kind of get them to use the tools in today's workshop and empower them to ask for more money, or really hone in as to what salary they should be asking for in comparison to their skill set. Hopefully that makes sense for everyone. And if it doesn't make sense, feel free to leave something in the chat. All right, Taylor, do you mind if you go to our next page? Perfect. So our first section, I always like to go through mindset. Mindset is incredibly important in almost everything that you do when it comes to salary negotiations or job hunting or your career success in the future. Because if you do not believe in yourself, it's going to be really hard to convince a recruiter or a hiring manager that you are deserving of whatever pay you're asking for. Okay, so it's important for you. What I have here in the description is preparing for salary negotiation requires you to have the right mindset. Make sure that you go through this exercise to take the time to prep your mindset and also help you develop beneficial habits and help you approach your negotiation with confidence. Because ultimately, if you do not have the right mindset when you're approaching these conversations, the hiring manager or recruiter or whoever you're talking to in regards to your potential pay might be able to pick up that you're not necessarily confident in your approach. And with that, I've seen it. A lot of people can use that to their advantage and specifically kind of manipulate the conversation to essentially offer you a lower pay than what you might be worth, right? And just to kind of also add a note here, not all recruiters and hiring managers are going to give you a lower offer. Right? There are a lot of recruiters and hiring managers that are entering this industry and understanding that women in particular deserve, equal pay and should be, are deserving of getting paid what they feel they deserve, right? The problem is that there are still people out there that are in these positions, i.e. recruiter or hiring manager positions, where they do not necessarily have that mindset. But what you can control is how you choose to address these conversations and make sure you approach these conversations with the correct information that you have and also backed by information that essentially can help sway the conversation to receive the salary or the pay that you desire. I am going to let the questions be in control for, Taylor will just control the questions whenever you want to interrupt me, Taylor, or Sadell or Abby, feel free to interrupt me, okay? I'll let you guys control the questions. Now, what we're gonna do is take some time right now, right? Because this is a workshop. There are some examples here in terms of harmful thinking and growth mindset. Now, for those that are not familiar with this type of, with growth mindset, I'm gonna quickly explain what it means. So there was a Stanford psychologist named Carol Dweck who wrote a book called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. Essentially, she wrote this book as an inquiry into the power of certain beliefs that people have, both conscious and unconscious, and how changing even the simplest of your thoughts can have a profound impact on every aspect of your life. One being salary negotiation. Now, she talks about two concepts. In this workbook, I call it harmful thinking, but if you just look her up, what she calls is a fixed mindset. Now, a fixed mindset assumes that your character, intelligence, and creative ability are static, meaning that you don't feel that you need to learn anything new, right? Or that you can't change in any meaningful way, and that success is the affirmation of your inherent intelligence. With that being said, you can understand that a fixed mindset of not wanting to learn more or improving yourself can be what I call harmful thinking. Because if you're not willing to improve your skill set, it's going to be a lot harder to negotiate your strengths and use that as a way to back up your pay or your desired pay. Now, what she says and notices is that there are people who have this fixed mindset, and those people often stay stagnant in their career and are not motivated. They are not able to address challenges, etc. Now, there are some individuals that approach their life with a growth mindset, which is what we have here. A growth mindset is usually when people have this mindset where they thrive on challenges. They're willing to address these challenges and learn what they need to improve on and end up improving upon it. They see failure not as evidence of unintelligence, but as a way for them to grow and stretch their existing abilities. So hopefully that is a good difference of understanding for fixed mindset and growth mindset. Now, what we're going to do today is your first exercise will be practicing how you can shift your mindset. So as you can see here in our negotiation workbook, we have 3 examples. So what we're going to have you do is shift your self-talk to come from a growth mindset rather than a harmful thinking mindset. Or in this case, Carol Dweck calls it a fixed mindset. Now, I'm just going to talk through some of the examples in case you don't have time. But again, you can either write this in your notebook. You can also have a Google Doc on the side. You can also wait until you're home if you're listening to this and on the train or something like that. But some examples of harmful thinking and shifting them to growth mindset. We have our first example as, I can't seem to land an interview. So this is what we would consider harmful thinking or a fixed mindset. And how you want to shift this type of thought process is to say and tell yourself that you will test out new strategies to land an interview, right? So we're seeing that we're not focused on particularly what isn't going well. We're trying to find ourselves a solution as to how you can achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve. Our second example says, my resume sucks. Right? The growth mindset of this harmful thinking is to tell yourself that you will review your resume and double check to see what improvements you can make. So again, this type of thought process is you thinking about how you can address, provide solutions for yourself, so that way you're not focused on what isn't working. And the last example here is, I won't see a pay raise. So this type of thinking, we're providing an example for growth mindset to say, I will see a pay raise and get paid what I deserve. Now, this is slightly different. This is more so on manifestation and affirmation side of things, but it's still helpful to think about, think of your approach in this type of sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to allocate about 10-15 minutes for this exercise. So we're just gonna give you some time for you to work on this exercise.
Before we jump into the exercise, Kimberly, we do have one question in the chat, and I apologize for not getting it out sooner.
Oh, no worries.
It's a little bit before the mindset exercise conversation, but does hiring managers have an incentive to hire people at a lower salary?
That's a good question, Charlotte. And it really depends on the company. Now, I can share with you the mindset that goes behind salaries. Now, some companies will already have a budget in set for the particular position, right? So they have to work with that budget. If the company is bigger, they have a CFO that designates each position a particular salary budget. So the hiring manager or recruiter will often be unable to offer more than that. That's one scenario in terms of like why you might look at it as a lower salary. There could be instances where a hiring manager or recruiter is given a range, a salary range for that position. Depending upon the recruiter or hiring typically the hiring manager will make that decision. The hiring manager will make a decision based upon your experiences. Oftentimes, this is probably the more fair option, right? They'll make a decision based upon your level of experience, what you can bring to the table. But there are instances where hiring managers might choose to offer a lower salary just to see if you are going to negotiate, right? And this is not something that happens for across the board, but there have been instances that I have heard of hiring managers that will specifically send an offer with a lower number to see if you're going to negotiate. And if you do accept that lower offer, they're not going to make the decision to offer you more money, right? Because you've accepted it. Now, the reasoning behind that decision could vary. It could just be that this person thinks that you're not worth a higher number. It could mean that this person realizes that there are hiring other people, and if they can get you to accept a lower salary, that will allocate some more room in the budget to hire another person. And there could be a situation where this person just thinks that your level of experience is, deserving of a lower number, if that makes sense. So there's a variety of different reasons why a hiring manager, might offer a lower number than what you were expecting. You also have to kind of approach it from like an industry standard, which we'll kind of talk about later. It might just be that this company doesn't have enough money to offer what you were hoping for because they just don't have it in the budget. Hopefully that answers your question, Charlotte.
Awesome. Thank you, Kimberly.
Yeah, of course. I guess also I will put a timer on my end just so that way I can keep track personally. And if anyone has any particular questions about the workbook, please feel free to drop them down below. Again, you don't have to just come up with 3 more ways to talk to yourself in terms of identifying how harmful thinking is different than growth mindset. You could always do more, but this is definitely a good way for you to train yourself on how you can identify what type of self-talk is harmful thinking, or in other words, a fixed mindset, versus how you can change that to approach it from a growth mindset. And a question that I always get about mindset is, how do you start to realize that you're approaching thoughts from a growth mindset? And I think it varies for every single person. Something that I always recommend to people is to practice this every single morning, right? If you can incorporate your mindset shifts every single morning in your morning routine, even if you're not writing this down, but maybe you're just talking to yourself in the mirror, I think that is a wonderful way for you to really practice and asking yourself, am I practicing a growth mindset in the situation, right? And because a lot of what we're talking about today, although it's focused on salary negotiations and salary conversations, you can really start to understand how you can utilize some of the exercises in today's workshop in your own personal life, right? So this can extend beyond salary conversations. So maybe it's just like personal development, or maybe there's just something in your career that you're trying to fix about yourself. At least you can utilize this exercise in different areas of your life.
So it looks like we have Cassidy in the chat and just is asking, would this be a good example? I won't land a job after graduation is obviously the harmful thinking. And then I am valuable and beneficial to companies. She's saying, I'm not sure because it isn't exactly proactive.
I think, Cassidy, that's a good start. And I think that's what's most important. I think what you have is really good. I would probably even say if you're going from I won't land a job after graduation, you can say you can tell yourself I am valuable and beneficial to companies, and I know I'll be able to land a job after graduation. Something to just kind of tell yourself that you are capable of achieving something. But great job.
Thank you.
And for anyone else that's watching, because I know we have over 50 people today, feel free to also follow Cassidy's example here. If you want to write in the chat, Taylor can share it with me. You know, if you want to use me as a sounding board, I'm more than happy to provide some additional feedback.
I had another question come through, and I'm Sareli, I believe. Sariel, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing their name correctly, but would you recommend writing a letter or having a convo right then and there? I think we're going to dive deeper into this.
Yes, definitely. We'll definitely be diving deeper into this question. Short answer is it really depends. And what we'll do is we'll bookmark this question for when we start to approach more relevant sections in the workbook and come back to this question, just so we're not jumping ahead. But short answer is it really depends in terms of how you want to approach conversations.
Awesome, thank you.
Of course. So we have 4 minutes remaining, everyone.
Okay, we have one more in the chat from Sophia saying she's not too sure about this. So satisfied at any job. And then I'll consider that the perfect job does not exist and try and engage from a learning mentality.
Sophia, that is a very good start. I will say my first question would be, do you think that there isn't a perfect job for you? Because if that is the case, if you don't think there's a perfect job for you, I would ask you why. I would probably try to approach it in terms of if your harmful thinking is I'll never be fully satisfied at my job or at any job, I would first back up and ask yourself, why do you feel this way? And then if you truly feel that there is not a particular job out there that you'll feel fully satisfied by, because as a career coach, I would say that there is a possibility that there will be. And I would actually try to focus your energy in saying, in shifting that thought to say, I'll be able to locate the perfect job for my skill set and my interests. Just because the second part of it, I'll consider that the perfect job does not exist. To me, that kind of seems like you're still approaching it from a fixed mindset. So we want to kind of dive a little bit deeper and try to focus your energy in asking yourself why you feel that way, and kind of basically prove yourself wrong, right? Maybe there's an actual opportunity to look for your dream job. Maybe there is a dream job where you'll feel satisfied. And as someone who coaches people in careers, I definitely say there's probably something out there that will satisfy you from like a mentality perspective. So maybe we can shift it from I'll never be fully satisfied at any job to I'm going to do as much research as I can to locate a good, a dream job of mine that will keep me engaged mentally, emotionally, etc. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, awesome. Sorry, I read that wrong, but
oh, no worries.
Thank you, Sophia, for putting that in there.
Yeah, that was a good one. Awesome. So we're out of time for this specific exercise. So great job, everyone. And so I'm going to have Taylor scroll to the next mindset exercise, which we won't spend too much time on this because this should be a little bit more straightforward, but we'll just spend about 5 minutes on this exercise. And so similar to what I mentioned before in the previous exercise, what we're going to do in this particular practice is we're going to script practice. So ultimately what I'm going to have you do is write down affirmations about your career 5 times per statement that you have down below. So I have 2 examples. You're going to write, or, if you want to use this as an example, an example of this could be, I have the skill set to do X job at X company, right? And you would write this particular statement. Another example or being particular about the specific job, particular about the specific company, and particular about the pay that you are interested in. And you will write that 5 times. Now, these are just 2 examples. You can also just write down, you can say, I know I'm an expert in graphic design, or I know I'm excellent at graphic design, and start off there. You can also approach it from saying, I know I'm an excellent public speaker. You can focus on your skill set that you have. And if it helps to think about a particular dream job that you're working towards, think about what skills that you need for that dream job or for the desired job that you're trying to obtain. And just focus on the skill set and ask yourself, do I have this skill set? And am I confident in this skill set? If yes, then use that as an example to practice your scripting. And so while you're doing that, I will set 5 minutes for this. This should be a little bit easier. 5 minutes has started. And while you're scripting, I'll kind of elaborate as to why this type of practice is important. Something I already said in the last page, and I'm going to kind of reiterate, is that when you are approaching any conversation related to your career, right? So for those of you that are not familiar with the workforce, that you will have a variety of conversation throughout your career. You'll have conversations about salaries, you'll have conversations about offers, you'll have conversations potentially, not guaranteed, about terminations, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, right? Keep in mind, I've been the person that hired people. I've also been the person that's fired people. You might have conversations about, workplace behaviors, whether that's in a group setting or in a private setting. You might have conversations about promotions, right? You'll have a variety of different conversations throughout your career as you launch into the workforce after your college education. Now, hopefully, you'll be able to take these mindset exercises and be able to use it for any type of conversation. Obviously, today we're just focused on salary negotiations, but you can also use these mindset exercises to really make sure that when you're approaching conversations at any point in your time, you are setting yourself up for success, right? And if you're not big into manifestation, which is a little bit more of a spiritual thing, this is just a great way for you to be able to reduce imposter syndrome, right? Because what we're doing here is we're specifically focusing on a skill that you know you have, and essentially telling yourself that you have this skill set, and that is what makes you valuable, right? We're writing down affirmations about skill sets that you know you have, and or goals that you are working towards, right? So those are kind of like the context as to why I have this part as an exercise for mindset, because it is incredibly important for you to be able to shift your mindset in order for all the other exercises to be successfully implemented. Let me tell you, I have had to work with a lot of clients, and a lot of them have been students, and they most of them actually, and particularly women, I can see from how they write their resume, I can see from how they talk to me, that they don't have a level of confidence in their skill set or experience. And when we start to flesh out their resume and we start to flesh out their level of experience, I am basically their cheerleader, and I start to tell them, like, look, you have these level of experiences, which is very, very pertinent and relevant to the type of job you're applying to, right? And I think when you have someone who's able to kind of address what experiences you have, that can be helpful, but ultimately you yourself have to believe in yourself, right? It's a level of belief that you have to have instilled in your mindset already. And, some people call that confidence, right? So you have to have a level of confidence when you are approaching your career in general, especially if you're looking for a job, or if you're currently in job hunting, or even if you're trying to change careers, right? Most professionals, most people out there are always interested in improving themselves and interested in learning what their next opportunity is, and having a confident mindset can really help them get there faster. All right, we have 3 seconds left before we move on to the next one, but I think maybe Taylor might interrupt me, so I'll give her that opportunity.
There's nothing in the chat currently, so we can move on.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So hopefully you are able to do that exercise. We are now going to go into understanding your value, right? So after you've already tackled your mindset and you've been practicing growth mindset, you're approaching your morning routines and telling yourself, you have the skill set, right? Now it's important to really hone in on your values, right? What is your value? What are you able to bring to the table? What is your experience, right? And I think oftentimes college students in particular think that they don't have anything to bring to the table because they're competing with people who have 10 plus years of experience, right? And while there are pros and cons to people who have 10 plus years of experience, there are pros to being a student, right? A lot of companies are specifically targeting undergrads and college students that are ready to enter the workforce because they are fresh-minded, they're moldable, they're flexible, they're adaptable, they're excited about joining the workforce. And let me tell you, this is a fact because I've worked with companies who have robust college college programs and internships where they specifically target undergrads or college students to join their company long-term, right, or after they graduate. So I hope that after this workshop, you start to realize that there is some level of importance of your situation, right? Because you are someone who is flexible, again, moldable, adaptable, and feel free to use these terms in your interviews because I've heard hiring managers particularly tell me that that's a few reasons as to why they really enjoy working with college students, right? Because you're excited, ambitious, etc. So what we need to do, right? Because we are here to help you negotiate the salary you want and deserve, we need to make sure you know exactly what you're bringing to the table. So similar to the mindset script practice, we're going to have you write down specific achievements. Some examples could be awards or honors, or maybe just projects that you know you killed and crushed, right? That back up your skills and experience. So for example, these are just examples. The first example we have is I helped grow a social media account from X to X followers, right? We're showing that you've been able to implement a certain strategy to help grow a social media account. Another example is I received Employee of the Month award in 2019. That's a more simple one, right? But what we want to do is we're going to give you about, I believe we are allocating about 10 minutes for this. So feel free to use 10 minutes to write down all of your achievements that you can think of, any successes that you may have achieved. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be an award or an honor. It could be a project. It could be a contest that you won. It could be, an A+ on an assignment. Think about even the smallest things that you've achieved, because while you might think it might be small, to another person, it could be very, very impactful. So I'm started the timer. You have 10 minutes. I'm giving a 5-minute warning. And feel free to ask any questions regarding this particular exercise. Cassie, I see that you may be struggling. Something that I definitely want to emphasize is that you can think of the smallest thing. So, for example, you don't need a certification to prove that you're good at a specific skill. So say, for example, you know you're good at event planning, right? That is something you can talk about. And you can say, as an example, say, for example, you know you're good at event planning and that is what gets you going, right? You can say, I've hosted X amount of events this year. Maybe you've only hosted one event, but you can say, I've hosted one event with X attendees or X people registered for the event. That is a good value. What's helpful is that I am sure every one of you have something incredibly valued to bring to the table. And it's just a matter of really thinking through, right, what your past experience has been. Because ultimately, something that you're writing on your value could be reflected in your resume, right? We're just not saying that this is a resume exercise, because really what we're asking you is, what is the value that you're bringing to the table, right? And maybe some of you have not yet written a resume, but if you haven't, definitely be sure to check out the UCSC Career Success team and services, because I'm sure that they can help you curate a resume and start there. But ultimately, what we're kind of asking here is very similar to what you'd be putting on a resume.
So it looks like there's a question from Cassidy. So how far back can valuable events go in terms of on a resume? In a different workshop, we decided that if you are a senior in college, you shouldn't be including high school things anymore.
That's a good question, Cassidy. And I would agree with that. You don't want to be including high school things, but if you are struggling with identifying what you've done in college, it doesn't hurt to reflect your time in high school, right? But what we're trying to talk about here is what you want to do is focus on what's relevant. I would say only think about your time in high school if it's going to help you think about your time in college, right? But what we really want you to kind of hone down is, what more recently have you done that you would consider valuable, or what you might think could be valuable to whatever job you're interested in.
And then we have another one. So if we already have an offer, how do we know, based on our value, how much more to ask for?
That's a very good question, and we will actually be diving into this in, I think, the next slide or a couple slides, and which I think will be a good segue anyways, because we are pretty much done with this exercise. So my answer to you, Nicole, it really depends on your research. So what we've done, just to recap, is we've set you up with a strong, confident mindset, right? So you're confident in approaching conversations. What we've also done is to kind of help you identify what value you can bring to the table. So we've improved your mindset. We've helped you kind of understand what value you can bring. Now, what we need to do is take those two things and do as much research as you possibly can. Because if you already have an offer, what should have already happened is this step, right? So before you even hopefully receive an offer, you've done your research in terms of what is a good monetary ask or a good desired salary to have based upon the research that you've done. So now here's the extensive part of my answer to your question. Here are some recommendations that I have for researching what is a good salary, right? Now, a lot of people think that if they just check LinkedIn, if they just check Glassdoor, that is it, right? If you just check one source. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And I highly, highly encourage you to not just focus on using one website because it's not going to give you a good idea. Now, something that maybe you might not realize, or maybe some people don't know, is that I always encourage clients to do informational interviews, right? So specifically what I have here for research recommendations is when you have informational interviews on top of the research that you're doing on payscale.com, salary.com, linkedin.com, glassdoor.com, you're asking targeted individuals who you've done research on that are that have knowledge in the industry that you're interested in, and basically asking them questions about what they think is the appropriate pay range for a certain skill set and experience. Now, this is a conversation that I think a lot of people have difficulties with because they feel uncomfortable, they feel awkward. And the thing here is, what I want to say is that you don't want to just meet someone random and say, hey, for my skill set, what do you think I'm worth? Right? That is not how you approach those informational interviews. How you want to approach these informational interviews is to develop a relationship with this individual. And once you've had conversations warming up to them and they're willing to have additional conversations, to then ask them, hey, I'm interested in this industry and I'm specifically looking for roles with this job title. Do you happen to know what maybe a salary range would look like for a company like yours, just so I have a better understanding of what is appropriate to ask and what number I should be specifically looking for, right? And so I think this is a really huge game changer because oftentimes people feel scared to talk about salary, and particularly women, right? What I've learned is that the more you talk about salary, the more you'll realize what is appropriate to ask, or maybe there's an opportunity for you to ask more, and it all starts with developing networking relationships and having informational interviews, which turn into professional relationship networks that you have that you can lean on and get that additional context from people who specifically work in that industry.
Awesome. And Nicole had a little follow-up and really saying that, she's done the research, but a lot of websites really don't address or post what the salary is for someone. So these are what the websites you're recommending, but what if they can't find that information there? Is that informational interview really the next step?
Yeah, so Taylor, you got it right. I always recommend, if you can't find what a particular job title is worth online and you've really searched, right? What LinkedIn.com has actually been doing a lot better, and they're trying to implement as one of their features, is to incorporate the salary ranges on their job postings. So I've noticed that some job posting will say that, and if you're not taking the job title that you are being offered and using LinkedIn as a tool to literally look for other job postings with that same job title in that same industry, and you really can't find anything, that's where you should lean on informational interviews, which hopefully you've already done, right? I have a whole strategy in terms of how you approach job search. And if you're interested in that, obviously you can just go to my website for more curated services. But typically when it comes to salaries, if you really can't find anything, that's where you have to start asking and getting some more industry insight as to what is appropriate. Now, I do have some tricks. Say, for example, you don't know, which I'll talk about a little bit later in terms when we hit the strategy portion of this workshop, that you can kind of use in your conversation to understand, you know, in the event that you really can't find anything and informational interviews hasn't been successful for you, there is a last minute strategy that I like to share with people that you can implement, but you should be able to find some sort of salary range for the industry with that job title using LinkedIn and also informational interviews. Now, what you can also do is, say, for example, you found salary ranges with that job title on LinkedIn, but it's not within the same industry. So say, for example, you're interested in working in the tech industry as an event coordinator, but you can't find any salaries on LinkedIn, but you found salaries that list for event coordinator in advertising industries. Now, keep in mind, tech industries and financial industries pay the most, right? So advertising industries do not pay as much as a tech industry or a financial services like a bank, right? So you have to be mindful in terms of your research. Like, are you researching the industry? Are you really understanding what the trends are for your career in that particular industry that you're interested in? And if so, then you should already have a good sense of like, okay, if advertising at this is offering this type of salary range, then I can probably estimate that the salary range for a tech company could be a little bit higher. But again, you just want to make sure you're doing extensive research. And if you really can't find anything, start to lean on informational interviews.
Thank you. And then Charlotte put in the chat, is there any danger for asking for more? And I think we'll probably get into that.
Yes, great question, Charlotte. We will. So my answer to that short answer is it depends, but we will dive into it in the strategy part. Now, with that being said, we can move on to the next page of this workbook, which is about research. So we're not going to do the research right now because this is just something you can do on your own time. But what I do want to explain for this specific exercise, right, and you don't have to necessarily write in this workbook, you can have it on a Google Doc, but ultimately what you want to aim for is understanding what is the industry that you're interested in? What are the particular job titles that you're looking for? What job responsibilities are you trying to hit? And once you have those three identified, then you can start doing research on all those three, right? So ask yourself and do research on, okay, if for this job title, what are the salary ranges for all the industries? Now, if this is my target industry, let's try to see what other salary ranges I can find based on the companies within that industry, right? So I like to call this reverse engineering, right? So reverse engineering for me, when I share this with clients, is ultimately when you have a goal or when you have something that you set your eyes on, you want to ask yourself, how can you get there, right? Or what can you do to better understand how you can get there? And in this case, we're trying to collect as much research on the job title, the industry, the company, and like what they offer. And nowadays, a lot of companies are striving to be more transparent in their offerings. So if you look on like built-in, I think there's one for built-in LA or built-in Bay Area or built-in San Francisco, specifically for tech companies. They will specifically write out their benefits, right? So not only are you looking at salary from a monetary perspective, but keep in mind that you can also receive benefits outside that are non-cash, basically. So you want to be able to jot down and track all these job postings and see what they can offer, because there are job postings out there that will tell you this is how much this position will pay, or this is the budget, right? There are job descriptions out there that will explicitly state the salary or the budget for that particular position. And it's on you to make sure you do research and keep a record or track all this information. So that way, whenever you're approaching conversations, you can just easily reflect that Excel sheet or Google Doc or whatever it is, and identify what is a good strategy for you to handle that conversation. Hopefully that makes sense for everyone. Are there any questions in particular about research before we move forward to strategy?
It doesn't look like it.
Perfect. Awesome. So now we're going to dive deep into strategy. And this is pretty much where we will help you identify what your salary strategy is going to look like, right? So strategy is where you develop and design a plan that you can properly implement. This is where you map out what you've learned from having a confident mindset, from understanding your value, and from the extensive research that you've done prior to having interviews, and develop a plan of attack. Essentially, what we want you to do is utilize the following exercise under strategy development to help you come up with an actual execution and script that execution. So we're just going to hypothetically say, for example, there is a job out there that you like, and without any research, let's pretend that you've already done your research. So what we're going to do is we're going to allocate about 10-15 minutes. We'll do 10 minutes, and then I realize I'm so sorry, Taylor, I forgot to take a break. But we'll take a break after strategy before we dive into the following parts. But we'll do 10 minutes for this particular exercise, and once we're done with strategy, we'll take a 10-minute break for you to stretch and stuff like that. So what we want to do is hypothetically think of a job that you like, write your target salary, right? So you don't have to do research on this, just, pretend from what you currently know, what is your target salary? What do you want to be paid? And this could be hourly, this could be salary, right? Then write your target salary range. Again, this is going to be a range that could be hourly ranges or salary ranges. And then what we have here is write the lowest salary range or number that you are willing to walk away with. Because what's important here is to identify that not all, say for example, you get your dream job, right? But they're not able to offer you the higher part of your salary range. You have to be able to ask yourself, well, if this is your dream job, what is a good number that you're willing to walk away with? Because while you might not be able to walk away with a number that you want initially, this company that is your dream company and you're working your dream job might end up getting more money in their budget, sometime down the line, and actually offer you more money at the end of the year or even earlier. So what's important to recognize here is that while you can come up with a random target salary that you think currently is the perfect target salary for you, and you come up with a range, ask yourself, you know, what is the lowest number, or what is the lowest range that you are willing to walk away with for your dream job, or for your dream career, or for the job that you're looking for. So clock has already started. Hopefully you started writing. And I think this is probably a good time while you're working on this to answer some of the earlier questions that we had.
We did just get a question in the chat from Denise. This may be a dumb question, but what is considered a good salary or a range in general? I am currently living with my parents, but I would want to move out once I get a job. So how would I calculate good pay range?
That is a very good question. So the thing is, it's not about what you think is a good pay range. It's about what is a good pay range inconsistent with your skill set and your level of experience, right? So depending upon how relevant your past experiences that you're noting in your resume, that can constitute whether or not you can ask for more, or you can strive to, you know, achieve a higher pay, if that makes sense. So this is where your research has to really play, right? Most jobs out of college, I'll be straightforward, right? So my background at UCSC, I graduated and completed my undergrad in 3 years, and I was a double major. So I doubled in politics, and I got a BA in politics and a BA in legal studies. I had the intention of going to law school, but I ended up not going that route, and instead I moved across the country. And as a recent grad that graduated in 3 years with 2 BAs, I was able to secure my first job at $50K annually with overtime, which is really, really high for someone who just graduated. So keep in mind that this is something that I received as my first job out of college, right? And this wasn't a number that I just got right away. This was a number that was negotiated because there was a law firm that was also negotiating for, basically there was 2 companies fighting for me. And I was able to leverage these 2 companies to offer a higher number. But when I first started searching for jobs, especially in the East Coast, I was getting offers for like $15 an hour, right? And this is for corporate jobs, right? So you have to understand that it's not about what you think is a good pay just so you can, you know, live on your own. It's a matter of how can you leverage your value, leverage the skill set, leverage the experience that you've been able to receive during your undergrad to back up as to why you might be asking a higher number, right? So that is the mindset of how you want to be looking at it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. I think your experience also was very helpful. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course, no problem.
Awesome. We have a few more questions. So from Sophia, if we're talking yearly and we're doing the range, would we put our target salary in the middle of that range, or at the end of the range, or at the beginning of that range?
That's a good question. I would say, and trust me, I struggle with this a lot. I would say if you have a range, right? Why have your target salary be the middle of the range? Definitely ask for that higher number. And I am married, and I always like to lean on my husband when I handle these salary conversations, because he's also has experience, you know, maybe not necessarily in HR, but he's been part of the recruitment process, and he's seen firsthand the salaries that people have come in with and their level of experience. I will tell you straight up that there have been people who do not hit all of the job experiences, and maybe you would consider them, not fully experienced for the job function, but they get paid a lot more. And this is where being able to understand your value and doing extensive research can help, because I am always fearful, depending upon the situation, or I have been fearful in the past, if I can ask for a bigger number. And luckily, because he has his experience, he's always encouraging me to ask for more, right? Do not be nervous to ask for the higher number in your salary. The most important part to recognize in this instance, specific to your question, is to be able to back up your reasoning for that salary, right? This is where your value comes in, right? What you're able to bring to the table. This is where your research come in, because we're not trying to set you up in a situation where you just say, well, even though I'm an undergrad, I think I'm worth 90K. If a recruiter or hiring manager comes back to you and says, okay, well, why are you worth 90K? You have to be able to explain and showcase your strengths related to that particular job description, right? Everything that you're essentially relaying should be relevant to the job description to back up as to why, right? So maybe this is the instance where you bring up your research and say like, well, I've received other offers, or I've done research in these industries, and typically for this job description, they offer X to X, right? So we're not just trying to make you say, pick a random number that you think is high enough for you to live on your own. It's more about using strategic intention with your research and understanding your value to be able to know that you can back up that target salary. And if you know that this is your range, right? Maybe your range is from like maybe 30K is your lowest, but 50K is your goal, right? Because you think that, with your level of experience, particular with this job description, that this is what you can bring to the table, and you can crush the job. Then I would say, let's go with 50 and just, ask for 50 straight up. But if you feel that that is not necessarily, if you think that you're lacking in some area, you should still ask for 50K, because you can always negotiate down if they feel the same way. But never, or I guess I don't want to say never, but I would encourage you to try to focus on the higher number in your range, but with the understanding that you can provide backup details as to why. Does that make sense?
Yes, super helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
Awesome. So we have a few more that have popped through. So Haley was really, it kind of guess it goes with the question that was just answered, but really, how do you calculate a good pay range fresh out of undergrad school with little actual work experience in your field? You've obviously said researching and understanding your skill set. Is there any other tips that you'd have for recent college grads that don't have that work experience behind them?
I think the 2 points that Taylor mentioned are the biggest answers to that question. I would just add, it's not about, I would try to focus your energy, not necessarily trying to calculate a good pay range. What you need to understand is, and have a better understanding of, is what is industry standard, right? We're not trying to calculate what you think is a good pay range, right? We want to calculate based upon what your research shows, what people in the industry are saying companies are paying, because then that's how you can determine where you are in your experience and what salary range is the best salary to negotiate. Rather than asking yourself, okay, this is what I need, right, in order to move out, right? You can do that for your personal goals, but in terms of approaching a salary conversation, a hiring manager or recruiter is not going to care that you want to move out, right? What they want to hear from you is backed up information, whether it's done in your research or whether it's in your experience and value that you can bring to the table, that backs up as to why you should receive this salary. And that goes back into the research, informational interviews, right? Where you've already asked people and gotten a better sense as to what people are actually getting paid for the job responsibilities that are in the role.
Okay. Is it common to for employers to revoke offers for employees? Or no, I guess they're not an employee yet.
That's a good question. And I would say, I don't want to use common as the correct term. I would probably say it does happen, right? And it could happen for a variety of things. So a employer might pull out or revoke an offer because they may have heard that you are looking at other jobs, maybe that they maybe someone in the interview process that you met with decided to not move forward with your application for whatever reason. It could be a budget cut, right? In most cases, it usually is a budget cut, but there have been situations where it was because maybe the hiring manager saw something on your social media and didn't think it was appropriate and they decided to revoke the offer. Or it could be related to maybe you know, someone in the interview process met up with you and one of your responses triggered a thought that maybe you're too risky to onboard. And, you know, after they sent the offer letter, only now they're relaying to the hiring manager that you're not a good choice. I'm not saying it's common, but it does happen. I don't think you should make the assumption that that there's a possibility to revoke offers, but I don't think that that's something you should remove from your mindset. You shouldn't make the assumption that an offer is guaranteed until it's signed by both parties.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, we have 2 more questions. So not sure if this is relevant to strategy, but I'm wondering about how to leverage a degree if it is not relevant to the field or job that we are applying for. Does our degree still matter if it is not relevant? Is it relevant work experience more important? What are your thoughts?
I love this question. And let me tell you, my first job was working at a top bank in New York. And again, my 2 degrees were in politics and legal studies. And my first job was receptionist type work. And that had later turned into a recruiting position. I don't think your degree, your specific major necessarily matters unless you were specifically looking for software engineering positions. Now, if you are interested in software engineering positions or particularly maybe like product positions, it does benefit you more if you have that major. But you can still land a job without a degree that is relevant, or without a degree being relevant to that particular job description. The only thing is, say for example, you're interested in being a software engineer, but you didn't major in software engineering, you have to have a portfolio that showcases your projects that you've worked on and that you've coded yourself, right? So you have to then use experience, projects you've worked on, to prove that you can do the job, right? That's just kind of like the extreme example of, you know, if you don't have a degree and you're interested in a job that may, you know, be more focused on finding people who do have that degree. Was that helpful?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, and then last question before we jump into a break. So at another workshop, they said that if they outright say no to your salary request, you should try to negotiate other things. What are other things we like, what are other things we can negotiate? I heard some people ask for stock options for those going into tech roles or companies. What are some other things you can negotiate?
Yeah, this is a good question. And something that I was going to mention in our next page for our strategy part is that if you can essentially negotiate non-cash. So what does that mean? If you're, say, for example, you're going into tech companies, if you're not familiar with stock options are, you basically get the option to buy stock for that company should they go public or something like that. That is one example, but that is more specific to tech companies. Now, say for example, you are, watching this and you're nowhere near tech industries. You're more interested maybe in law firms, maybe you're more interested in the creative industry. What you can negotiate are other non-cash, which could be your benefits. So you could, ask for more vacation days, or you could ask for more sick days. You can ask for more, I'm trying to think of what other benefits, potentially, a higher 401k match. The only thing I would say is that usually non-cash negotiation happens when the company is not willing to match your desired salary, but are willing to and open to negotiating non-cash stuff. So typically non-cash negotiation is more common with tech companies and companies with a lot of money. I would say non-cash negotiation is not as common with non-tech, non-finance. So you just have to be mindful in terms of this is where the research on the industry comes in, because if you're negotiating stock options with a creative industry, you might not necessarily it might just not make you look good because it seems like you haven't done your research on the industry, right? This is where informational interviews come in. So you want to make sure that when you're trying to negotiate non-cash, you have already done your research on that. Does that make sense?
Is someone trying to say something? Oh, okay. I didn't know. I heard an unmute. Awesome. Thank you, Kimberly. That was really helpful.
No problem. So what I'll do is before we continue with the next page's strategy, we can take a 10-minute break for everyone. Does that feel good? We can do a bathroom break. You can stretch, take a mini break.
Yeah, 10 minutes sounds perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you.
No problem. I'll put a timer for 10. We have 2 minutes remaining for our break. Thank you all so much for sticking with us if you're still here. I know that this is a longer workshop, but Taylor is recording this, so you always have the opportunity to watch the replay. And like Sidel mentioned in the beginning, if you are able to stay through the very end, I think she has a few special potential giveaways for people who can stay till the very end. We have 1 minute and 30 seconds remaining, so get your pen ready, get yourself excited. Do some last minute stretching if you can. Thirty seconds remaining. Awesome. Perfect. Welcome back, everyone. And as Taylor mentioned in the chat, thank you so much for being here. So we are into the second page of the salary negotiation. If you were just joining in, Taylor did send the salary negotiation workbook to your email. So feel free to go through this with us in real time, or you can look at the screen that Taylor is sharing. Either works. Now we are looking at page 11 of this workbook. So for those that you are joining, that are just joining now, just to kind of give you a high level, what we've covered so far really quickly is the gender pay gap statistics. What is the gender pay gap between men and women, and women of color. We've also gone over the importance of mindset and how to shift your mindset. We've also gone over understanding your value and what you're able to bring to the table, and the importance of research and why you need to do extensive research for the particular job that you are looking for in order to determine the type of target salary you are trying to achieve based on the level of experience that you have and based on the relevant experience that you have per each job description. So if you have not met with the career success team in regards to developing or curating a resume, or maybe you don't know how to curate a resume, just really quickly, your resume should be curated per job description. You should not be using the same resume for every job. So it's the same thing with salary negotiations. You have to make sure your research is curated per job description, right? You have to make sure that you already know what exactly the job description entails, what that company is about, so on and so forth, in order for you to successfully negotiate a higher salary or the targeted salary that you're looking for. Now, with page 11 of this workbook, we're incorporating all of the exercises and strategies that we've talked about earlier in this workshop, and essentially planning out your strategy to have this conversation, this salary conversation. So part one of strategy, we asked you to write down your targeted salary, right? Write down your target salary range, write the lowest salary range that you're willing to walk away with, because there might be an instance where you might not be able to receive the top part of the salary range you want. And so you need to know when you're willing to walk away. Now, once you've determined that, what I have here is, I think someone asked the question, can you write this? Can you respond back in a letter format, or does that need to happen in real time, like face to face? And the reason why I responded to that question saying it depends is because it depends on how the hiring manager approaches the conversation with you, right? So if the hiring manager or recruiter approaches the conversation with you via email, then it is 100% appropriate for you to respond back via email. Now, say for example, the hiring manager calls you up instead. This typically does happen, but we will have an exercise at the very end to kind of help you prep for these situations if it is done, in real time, face to face, or over the phone, or over Zoom. But this particular strategy that we have here on the second part of strategy development is developing a response should you be responding back to an email, right? So the strategy here, exercise here for the first one, is write out how you would respond if a recruiter or hiring manager asks for what pay you are looking for. So essentially, if a hiring manager or recruiter asks you, okay, what is your target salary? Write out how you would respond. Now, the golden rule, at any point in time, an offer letter or a salary conversation comes up, and recruiters and hiring managers that disagree with me sharing this hate every single time I share this. And really, the golden rule is that person who drops the number first loses the salary conversation. So you as a candidate need to make sure you can devise a strategy to not be the first person to drop a number, right? And so make sure you're listening very closely in this section, because this will be helpful in our later portion, because we will have a role play section where we break out into breakout rooms. But ultimately, the goal here is that if a recruiter or hiring manager asks, what is your number? What is your salary number? You deflect as much as you can. You do not drop that number, right? And so this exercise should kind of help you come up with a way to deflect. And if you're asking, okay, well, how do I deflect him? Here is my key tip. If they ask you, what is the pay that you're looking for? An easy response to kind of help stop that conversation so they drop the number first is to ask them, what does your budget look like for this role? Boom. I hope you're like in your seats being like, oh my gosh, what? Because this is a huge, huge question. And typically, as a recent undergrad, asking this question surprises a lot of recruiter and hiring managers. My sister is had just recently graduated, and I gave her this. I help her with salary negotiations, with offer letters, etc. And I gave her questions to ask, particular to the job that she was looking for. And oftentimes the responses that she would get is like, oh, why are you asking that question? Right? If you do get that response, what I recommended to my sister is to respond back saying, and keep in mind, this is like in real time. She's like on the phone with recruiters and hiring managers when they're talking to her, right? Which is a lot harder, right? If you're having a conversation over the phone, it is a lot harder to have this conversation because you have to emotionally respond, but you have to make sure you're staying professional. So if a recruiter or hiring manager says, oh, may I ask, why are you asking that? All you need to say is something along the lines of, I am just curious to know what your budget is so I can make sure I can request a salary that is within your budget, right? Or you can say along the lines of, I want to make sure that I'm being mindful of your budget for this salary so I can make a determination and look at the compensation package as a whole. So those two work really well. Now, the second part of this strategy development exercise says, write out how you would respond if a recruiter or hiring manager is not willing or able to provide you with your desired pay. Right? So this is to kind of just help you get out of your comfort zone and kind of try to practice out professional responses should a recruiter or hiring manager say, so sorry, unfortunately, we're not able to hit that budget, because there are two responses that you could get that are not in your favor. A, they might just respond to you and say, sorry, we can't do that. We'll have to pass on this offer letter. Now, the biggest thing when it comes to salary negotiations, right? The reason why we have you determine what is the lower salary, right? And why we have you ask, what does your salary budget look like? Is so that way there is a number that you both can compromise with. And most often, companies do not want to just say, okay, well, we can't do that, bye, because they've already invested time and energy and resources and money in the recruitment process to get you onboarded or to even get you through the interview process. So typically, companies really want you to say yes to the offer letter, and they want you to work with them long-term because it costs the company a significant amount of money to hire, to recruit, to interview, right? That is a lot of money that is wasted on just recruiting and hiring, right? Versus people actually doing their functional job. So most often companies won't go the route of just saying, okay, well, we can't do that, bye. Typically what they'll do is they'll negotiate down. So this is where you have to know what your salary range is and what you're willing to walk away with. So that way you can say, all right, I'm willing to compromise at this number. If you're only able to do, or you can say, if you're only able to hit this number, is there a way we can negotiate non-cash benefits, right? Or non-cash compensation. And that's where, you can negotiate more vacation days. You can negotiate stock options depending upon the industry. Those are the two things I want you to work on for the next, I'll give you 5 minutes to work on it because I do want to give us enough time for the role play section. So I'm going to give everyone 5 minutes just to write down how they would respond, because what we're going to do with this section, 5 minutes has started, is essentially take everything that you've learned, right, from all the different parts of this workbook and try to implement it in our breakout rooms with our role play section of today's workshop to kind of help you dip your feet into how a conversation would look like. So you have now 4 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. And again, if you are not able to stay the entire time, or if you are just hopping in, Taylor will share the replay. So do not worry. And at the end as well, she will be sharing the role play script. So that way you can share it with a friend or a family member and you can continue practicing how you would respond to certain conversations.
Awesome. We have a few questions in the chat, so I think we can go through them while everyone's
perfect.
writing stuff down. So from Lisa, I was wondering if it's better to negotiate one-on-one or with a department, multiple people present, if any of those is an option. Have you ever heard of negotiating with multiple people or a full department space?
Interesting. I'm curious to know what makes you ask that question. For the most part, it's a one-on-one conversation. There could potentially be a second person in the room if you are or in the conversation, but typically the salary conversations are usually between either the hiring manager and the candidate or the recruiter and the candidate. Most often it's between the recruiter and the candidate, because in this instance, the recruiter is supposed to be playing the so to speak, bad guy if they're trying to negotiate a lower salary or if there are issues with salaries. So that way you don't have any like awkwardness or issues with your hiring manager should you accept it. The recruiter is supposed to be like the buffer. But an instance where I can see if there's multiple people is, say, for example, you're working at a startup, or if you are interested in working at a startup and maybe there's more than one co-founder. That could be an instance where maybe you're having a conversation with the co-founders directly and it would be multiple people, but ultimately they probably already have had a conversation in terms of what they can what their salary budget looks like. So they should be able to kind of in real time tell you what they can give you. Or what could end up happening is that if it is a multiple if there's more than one person, they might just say, all right, give us some time to look at our books and we'll get back to you. And that's where it goes. But typically when it's salary conversations, because they're so eager to bring you right away, they want to just get you to say yes right away. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, and typically from even my own personal experience, it's definitely been one-on-one negotiation. So you definitely see that more. Thank you, Surreal. Surreal, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? I'm not fully understanding it, and feel free to unmute and talk through what you were asking.
Yeah, so it's really good timing that y'all are hosting this workshop. I am in second round interviews for a position and I'm pretty confident that I'm about to land this job, but there is like on the job description, it literally says salary range like 46 to 56. And I'm already getting like in between there right now. So I want to definitely negotiate that. Thank you. I want to negotiate, like, I want that 55, 56 range, but I've never salary negotiated in my entire life. And so I'm trying to be prepared for when they offer it to me, like in a letter maybe, or in the second interview. So when the tactic was asking about their budget, I feel like they lay it out in the job interview. I mean, in the job description itself. So I was like, what else could I actually say?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and congratulations. That's wonderful. I hope you do get the job offer.
Thank
you. I would say do not bring up salary unless the recruiter or hiring manager brings it up. So say, for example, you have third round of interviews and they still don't bring up salary, do not be the first to bring it up. Usually that will put you out of the running. But say, for example, you do get third round of interviews and they do ask you what your pay looks like. I would then come back and say, I was reviewing the job description and I saw that the salary budget noted in this job description lists, 46 to 56K. Is that still accurate? Is there wiggle room for this, or is that still the same salary budget that you have for this position? And then ultimately they're going to come back to you and say, yep, that's still our salary budget. And in which case you want to say, great, good to know. If we can move forward with 56, right? You want to go for the higher number, knowing that you have the skill set and experience to back it up, right? You can start there, and then that's how it triggers. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Awesome. We have a few more questions from Nicole, but I don't know, are we moving on to the next portion and then open up
Yes.
time for some more Q&A after that, you think?
Yes, I do want us to have enough time for the role play because I think that's going to be helpful for everyone. What we'll do is I'm just going to spend 1 minute on the remaining pages. So if you don't mind, Taylor, perfect. So here are some high-level strategy tips that I may not have touched on. So just remember that after you have conversations with your recruiter or hiring manager, to thank them for their time so far. So in this case, sorry, Elle, I apologize if I'm butchering your name. In this case, if I was in her position and they provide a job offer, I would come back and respond back saying, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciated meeting the team. I enjoyed getting to better understand the company culture, so on and so forth, right? And then go into, I reviewed over the offer letter and I see that it's this number, and if you don't like the number, that's where you start the negotiation. But the whole point of this particular tip is you want to just thank the hiring manager recruiters for their time so far. Now, to kind of help draft that email, one thing could be helpful, or if you're doing this verbally, is to think of one positive thing you've liked about the company, so that way when you're doing the intro to your salary conversation, you're thanking them for their time and you're mentioning one positive thing that you loved about their company, or what you loved learning about that company. And then remember to think about your accomplishments, to think about your value, make sure you raise attention to it. So when you're, say, for example, negotiating 56, they had said, like, this is our salary range. You want to say, based on my level of experience and the what I know I can bring to the table and my value, would be comfortable with the 56K salary for this starting position. Then you want to listen and wait. So basically, if this is email, you obviously want to wait. If this is in real time and you're having a conversation with them, you just want to listen, and you just want to take down notes as to what their reasoning could be, etc. You want to be able to understand if and why they are going to push back, right? And that's how you would develop a response back to them. And if they can't hit your 56 number, or if there's a reason why, you have to be ready to accept a lower number that you're comfortable with if you specifically want that job, right? If you want to move to the next page, Taylor, and here are some basic tips and reminders, right? Practice having a growth mindset. This will help with your confidence. This will help you better understand what your value is, what you bring to the table. This will help you come up with a stronger research strategy, and ultimately a strategy for when you approach salary conversation. Now, you have to remember that salary conversations, as we've noted, this title is a negotiation. It's a salary negotiation. Sometimes you might not be able to get what you want, and you have to be okay with that, right? More often than not, you have to expect that you're going to hear no, but you have to be willing to negotiate, right? So you have to learn how to be okay with that. And by practicing this role play script that we have, that can help you develop, what people over here like to call it thicker skin, but really you're just trying to basically mentally prepare yourself in the event that there's a salary conversation that you have that is not actually going hugely in your favor. But say, for example, you already have a different offer, or you're not willing to settle for this job, for this pay, then you don't have to accept it, right? Try to avoid oversharing and being too personal. We don't want to talk about how you want to move out of your parents' house. We don't want to talk about things that are going on in your personal life, because that can either, depending upon who you're talking to, not be necessarily what a good look would be to them. And you want to remain professional. So if you can, try to just maintain professionalism throughout the entire duration of the conversation and even after. And lastly, biggest thing, make sure you avoid being the first to drop a number. All right, and we can move to the next page. And here are just some resources that I have here for you to check up on. This is not an extensive list. This is literally just some sites. But really what you need to understand is how to be knowledgeable when you approach salary discussions, right? You have to do research. And I know I've said this time and time again, but if you're asking a question as to what is a good pay, that means you haven't done enough research. You should be able to ask or answer your own questions based upon the industry standard and what you've seen throughout your research, right? So if you're constantly asking like, well, what is the pay for this job title, but you haven't done informational interviews, and you should probably at least do 5 to 10, right? 5 to 10 informational interviews. If you haven't done that and you're asking yourself that question and you don't know the answer, then you haven't done enough research. And at the end here, I just say, if you want more personalized one-on-one help, I highly suggest you first go to the career success team because it's included with your tuition. But say, for example, you graduate college, you exhausted all the resources there, but you want my personal take, you're always welcome to check out my website. So with that being said, we are now going to jump into breakout rooms. So we are going to have, I believe, 4 breakout rooms with Taylor, Sadell, and Abby and myself, and we have a script to basically help guide a potential salary conversation. Now for the leaders, because I know we have some limited time, I would try to strive for the faster conversation. So I know I gave you a few options, but unless you are going through it pretty quick, maybe you can kind of strive for the faster options. But I'll give it over to Taylor, and then we'll try to get in some Q&A before we close.
Awesome. Yeah, so I have breakout rooms all set up for when we're ready to go, but let's answer just the last 3 questions that we have. Or do you want to answer them after the breakout rooms? I apologize if I misunderstood.
Oh, no worries. We can do it now. I'm totally happy to do it now.
Sounds good. So Nicole said, back to negotiating non-cash options. How many vacation days should we negotiate? Would they give the first number in this space, or would we ask for a certain number of vacation days?
Good question, Nicole. So typically vacation days are not hugely common to negotiate. I think on average, the days that I think that are common that you'll get are like 10 to 15 maybe. I think 15 being more on the generous end. And also on top of that, you don't just get the vacation days as soon as you start. It's like accrued by how long you work at the company. So you could negotiate more vacation days. I think realistically, what you want to do is calculate it based upon like what you want to see to make up for the pay that you're not seeing. But in all honesty, it might not make sense for you to negotiate 10 or 20 more vacation days, because most often companies it's not typical for you to negotiate 10 or 20. Typically what I see is like you negotiate like maybe 5 more, sometimes maybe 6 or 7. But I think if you want to approach it from like a salary perspective, you can just calculate it like, okay, well, if I'm not going to get this one, if I'm not going to get this salary, is there a way we can make it up through non-cash by adding this X amount of vacation days based upon what we would technically be seeing if they were of value.
Awesome.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. And then from Sandra, what about taking into consideration livable wages in your city?
That's a good question. And it goes back to your research. So typically in major cities, you get paid more. So for example, San Francisco, New York, you get paid a lot more because those are major cities, they're expensive to live in. So you will get higher wages, but you have to also understand that they are supposed to be consistent with the city that you live in. So you could get away with working a job in San Francisco and like live, you know, in a more affordable city. But if you say, for example, you work at a smaller city or a non-major city, you might not necessarily see that high number. So this is where your research comes in. You know, when you're doing research on the industry, you also want to do research in terms of like the city that you live in and see what companies relevant to that area is offering.
I realized I was muted. Thank you so much. I have the breakout rooms ready to go. I will launch them and I have them set for 20 minutes and then we'll just join back in the main room after that.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I think as people start popping back in, welcome back. How does everyone feel? Even leaders, if you want to chat and provide feedback. How did the role play feel for people?
And I just want to say, since it's a smaller group at this point, please feel free to unmute yourself and talk through that way as well.
I'm open to sharing. So although we kind of had a little trouble understanding exactly like how to get through the activity, we still managed to kind of discuss like the real life scenario, which I'm trying to face and be prepared for next Thursday. The second and final interview like is next Thursday, and so they'll make a decision after. So my guess is they'll probably email me the offer letter, and so in this activity, it felt like really good, even though it was just one time for me to actually practice, like them asking, okay, thanks for being interested. Like I did the whole thank you for your time. I tried to highlight some of my skills. And then when I asked them, is 56 like the max budget? You know, I'll go with that 56. But then the question came up of would it be okay for me to ask for 60 because it's so close? Would it be okay for me to ask for 58? Like, how do I convince them that like I'm worth that?
Yeah, and I think instead of me answering this question, I do want to talk to my group because our group was pretty good. So I guess Sandra or Catherine, did you want to share what you guys did?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share a little bit about the feedback that you provided, Kimberly. So Kimberly was just re-emphasizing like the importance of backing up your statement of value with metrics. So thinking about providing them insight about, you know, how many years of experience do you have, or how many projects have you managed or, you know, supervised within that industry? How have you increased profits for a company? You know, thinking about all of those percentages and all of those metrics is really important when it comes to showing really the tangible ways that like you are a valuable employee, if that makes sense. So yeah, that was my takeaway.
Yeah, and just to add to that, and what is important to that is that, yes, you can negotiate 60 if they're offering, I think you said 56 or 57, with the things that Sandra had mentioned. So it's definitely totally okay. And this is something that Catherine actually did. She told me upfront before our conversation that she was going to ask for 45, but instead in our role play, she asked for 47, which is completely okay because she was expecting for me to negotiate down to 45. And so I would say you can definitely ask for 60. I would just make the assumption that there's a possibility that that can be negotiated down to, 58 or 59. Was that helpful?
Yes, I think all that advice was actually really great. I was taking notes
Perfect.
on my phone to I'm actually going to type this out because I think it being through Zoom is a lot easier because I get to cheat and have 2 or 3 screens up looking at stuff. So if they ask you questions, I'm already prepared for the answers. So I do appreciate this entire workshop. It's definitely made me feel a lot better about next Thursday and being prepared to list out all my what's it called? Sorry, figure out what I have to offer and literally write it out in sentences if I need to. So thank you
Yeah.
everybody for the kind wishes.
Good luck. You got this. We are at time, but I guess we'll just give it one more minute to see if anyone else has anything they want to say, any particular questions before I have Taylor and Abby and Sadell close out. And something I just want to say as well is that I know you are all capable of negotiating and dealing with this conversation. It's definitely a tough conversation. I know from our group, it was nerve-wracking, but definitely use the role play script that Taylor will be sending out and practice with your friends, practice with your family members, because the more practice you have, the more confidence you'll have when you are actually having these real conversations, because it is very hard. And the reason why we have this and why I created this role play is because recruiters and managers sometimes will try to have a very difficult conversation and will put you in uncomfortable situations so that way you can drop a number, right? So their goal is to get you to drop a number. Your goal as a candidate is to not be the first person to drop the number. Your goal as a candidate is to deflect. So know that you are perfectly capable of deflecting. It's just a matter of making sure your approach, and Surreal mentioned, I think it was Surreal, if you know this is going to happen over Zoom or maybe a phone call, it doesn't hurt to have a few sentences just backing up why you deserve the salary, why you're bringing value to the team, why you know you'll be an asset, right? But make sure everything is relevant to that particular job description. You can't be talking about things that are irrelevant or things that are not even on the job description, because that's not going to help your case. In fact, that's going to harm your case and harm your salary negotiations. So just keep that all in mind. Awesome. So it doesn't look like we have any questions. So I'll give it back to Taylor and Abby and Sadell.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kimberly. This was really, really great. And I even learned a lot. So I'm thankful for being a part of this. I did add some links in the chat. So the first one was actually the YouTube link. Please know that that's our YouTube. You can check it out. There's many, many, many great event recordings on there. And then also just take the time to fill out that survey. It just helps us better understand if these workshops are really helpful for you all. And then I'm going to pass it over to Sadell, who I believe is going to announce the raffle winners.
Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, yes, thank you so much, Kimberly. That was an amazing workshop. I too learned a lot myself that I will be taking with me. But yes, raffle time. So we have 3 $25 Target gift cards. Okay. Woo-woo. Now I entered y'all's names into this name picker like maybe 30 minutes ago. So I might say some names of folks who people, who aren't here. So I'll call the names out. And if you're here, let me know that you're here. So the first person is Charlotte Dene, I'm not sure. Charlotte here?
I'm here. Thanks.
Perfect. Awesome. If you could direct message me your email, that would be great.
Okay.
Awesome. Congrats, Charlotte. Okay, our next person is Margaret Kim. You got
Oh.
Margaret? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Awesome. Congrats, Margaret. If you could also DM me your email, that'd be great.
Okay.
And then our last person, please forgive me if I butcher your name. Yingxi Liang. Do we
Hi,
have?
I'm here.
Yay. Okay. Congratulations. Also, if you could DM me your email as well. But thanks y'all so much. Congrats to the raffle winners. And, I hope you have a great evening.